Chairman Shanley.
Present.
First Vice Chair Messier.
Present.
Second Vice Chair Corvesi. Representative Ackermann.
Here.
Representative Agello.
Here.
Representative Baginski.
Present.
Representative Felix. Representative Hall. Representative Kennedy.
Present.
Representative Knight.
Present.
Representative McGaw.
Present.
Representative Nardone.
Present.
Representative Newberry.
Here.
Representative Shawcross-Smith. And Representative Tanzi.
Here.
Chairman, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Today is Monday, May 17th, 2021. Welcome to the House Committee on State Government and Elections. We have 6 bills on our calendar. 3 of those bills are posted for consideration, and the other 3 are posted for hearing and/or consideration. The first bill on our calendar comes to us from Chairwoman Fogarty. It is House Bill 5887. It would permit the URI Board of Trustees to attend Oakland Public Board meetings remotely. Is there a motion for passage?
So moved.
Moved by Representative Agello, seconded by Representative Tanzi. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chairman Shanley.
Yes.
First Vice Chair Messier.
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Corvesi. Representative Ackermann.
Yes.
Representative Agello.
Yes.
Representative Baginski.
Yes.
Representative Felix. Representative Hall. Representative Kennedy.
Yes.
Representative Knight.
Yes.
Representative McGaw.
Yes.
Representative Nardone.
Yes.
Representative Newberry.
Yes.
Representative Shawcross-Smith. Representative Tanzi.
Yes.
The ayes have it.
Thank you. The next bill we have on our calendar is also from Chairwoman Fogarty and relates to the University of Rhode Island. This bill is House Bill 5888, and it allows the URI Board of Trustees to make small procurements up to $50,000 for construction and $10,000 for all other purchases, with annual increases in the federal CPI. Is there a motion for passage? Moved by First Vice Chair Messier. Is there a second?
Yes. Teresa.
Second from Representative Tanzi. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call vote on 5888, please?
Chairman Shanley.
Yes.
For First Vice Chair Messier.
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Corvesi. Representative Ackermann.
Yes.
Representative Agello.
Yes.
Representative Baginski.
Yes.
Representative Felix. Representative Hall.
Yes.
Representative Kennedy.
Yes.
Representative Knight.
Yes.
Representative McGaw.
Yes.
Representative Nardone.
Yes.
Representative Newberry.
Yes.
Representative Shawcross-Smith. Representative Tanzi.
Yes.
The ayes have it.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Representative Felix, would you like your vote recorded on House Bill 5887?
Yes, please.
Is that in the affirmative?
In the affirmative, please.
Thank you. Next bill we have on our calendar is House Resolution 6002 from Speaker Pro Tempore Kennedy. This resolution would create a 30-member Rhode Island Semi-Quincentennial Commission to assist in the observance of the Semi-Quincentennial and report back findings by July 1, 2023, and produce a final accounting of funds by October 1, 2026, and expire on January 1, 2027. Is there a motion for passage?
So moved.
Moved by Representative Agello. Is there a second? Second. Second by Speaker Pro Tempore Kennedy. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chairman Shanley.
Yes.
First Vice Chair Messier.
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Corvesi. Representative Ackermann.
Yes.
Representative Agello.
Yes.
Representative Baginski.
Yes.
Representative Felix. Representative Felix. Representative Hall.
Yes.
Representative Kennedy.
Yes.
Representative Knight.
Yes.
Representative McGaw,
Yes.
Representative Nardone,
Yes.
Representative Newberry,
Yes.
Representative Shawcross-Smith, and Representative Tanzi.
Yes.
The ayes have it.
Chair, I think Representative Felix spoke after she called Representative.
I thought
Did you get them both? No, but did you get Representative Paul?
Hall, I did not.
I don't believe Hull is on the call yet.
Just want to make sure.
Either that or he sounds very different. The remaining three bills we have on the calendar, House Bill 6301, 6302, and 6316 are being scheduled for the first time. So I would ask that these three bills be held for further study. And I make that motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Deputy Whip Ackermann. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call vote on holding 6301, 6302, and 6316 for further study at this time?
Chairman Shanley,
Yes.
First Vice Chair Messier,
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Corvesi, Representative Ackermann,
Yes.
Representative Agello,
Yes.
Representative Baginski,
Yes.
Representative Felix,
Yes.
Representative Hull, Representative Kennedy,
Yes.
Representative Knight,
Yes.
Representative McGaw,
Yes.
Representative Nardone,
Yes.
Representative Newberry,
Yes.
Representative Shawcross-Smith,
Yes.
Representative Tanzi.
Yes.
The ayes have it on all three bills.
Thank you. The first bill that we are going to consider tonight is House Bill 6316 from Representative Fenton Fung, who's with us here tonight to introduce this bill. It is an act relating to elections and mail ballots and would require the Secretary of State to include on all mail ballots it provides an easily discernible watermark for verification purposes that is also approved by the Board of Elections. Representative Fenton Fung, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Shanley. It really is that simple. It'll be the easiest bill you guys might hear this entire session. So in order to, when we're looking at the next few years and increasing our election security, this became it with mail ballots. An issue came up in the community, and we're talking about ways that we can take mail ballots and say, hey, look, let's make sure this is the mail ballot that the elector sent in, and different ways that they can ensure that they're working with a real ballot, not a sample ballot, things like that. So the state of Tennessee just recently passed the legislation this is based on. Unanimously, both Democrats and Republicans really wanted to work together and say, what could we do, very simple manners to increase our security with mail ballots. This came up as, it's a very cheap measure across all things. We do have different vendors in the southern New England area that easily handle this. The vendor that we currently use did not respond to my inquiries quite yet. So I don't know if the one we're currently using has this capability, but many others in the area do. So this is a bipartisan bill that, again, very, very simple. All it does is it adds a watermark to the official ballot, and that way the voter themselves know it's the true ballot, and so does the one that, so do the members at the Board of Elections. I'll entertain any questions, but it's that simple.
Any questions for the representative? No questions. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The next bill we're going to look at comes to us from, excuse me, I should say there's one witness signed up on Representative Fenton Fung's bill, the Rhode Island Secretary of State. There's no position indicated, and they did provide written testimony, which is available online for anybody who wishes to read it. And that concludes the testimony in the hearing on House Bill 6316. The next bill we are going to look at is House Bill 6301 from Chairman McNamara. This bill authorizes the reopening of a dissolved campaign account and fund upon notice to the Board of Elections. There are no witnesses signed up on this bill, and Representative McNamara, or Chairman McNamara, is not here at this time. So for now, that will conclude the hearing on House Bill 6301, and we can move to the main event tonight, which is Representative Place's bill, House Bill 6302, which I'm sure is the reason most people have tuned in for the committee meeting. Representative Place is kind enough to join us tonight to introduce his legislation. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. This legislation, simply put, would just not allow businesses or government entities or universities in the state of Rhode Island to require proof of vaccines to gain entry into their businesses or into their establishments. This comes out of, quite frankly, I had a lot of requests from my district for similar legislation. When I look at my district, I look at the zip codes in Providence, Pawtucket, Central Providence, Pawtucket, Woonsocket. They're, for whatever reason, and I'm not going to decide why, I'm not going to get into the reasons why, but less than 40% or, well, less than 50% of the folks in my district and a lot of areas in, again, our inner cities have made decisions not to get the vaccines. And I just don't think that we as a government, and then, obviously as the way the legislation is written, specifically, I don't think we as a government should require proof of vaccination in order to gain access to our governmental services. You shouldn't have to show a vaccine card in order to get on a RIP the bus to get to work. I just don't think that that a person has to give up their right to privacy when it comes to their healthcare information in order to access government services. The way the legislation was written, I believe there's different, the drafter found different models throughout the country. I had specific requests from constituents talking about universities. So universities were added. Again, as I've mentioned in media appearances, this is, we're here to discuss the bill to see what the merits are for that particular aspect of the bill. Same thing for private businesses. Right now, should we allow a business to bar entry or should we require somebody to disclose personal health information and potentially disabilities just to gain access to, say, a Stop and Shop or something like that? Those are the questions that this legislation was intended to answer. My intent with the bill was specifically to ensure that someone wouldn't have to disclose personal health information to access government facilities and government services.
Okay. Any questions for Representative Place from members of the committee? No questions?
I got one.
Oh, we got one question. Representative Knight.
Representative Place, is there any difference between the bill that you, I'm having a problem in my mind formulating the question, but let me just tell you what I'm thinking about and maybe you can help me out. We have a long-standing policy for children and schools and vaccines where if they want to go to school, right, in a public setting, in a public school, if they want to take advantage of that option of public education, then they got to be vaccinated. I know that some people have a problem with it, but I don't think most people have a problem with that. Is your policy consistent with that previous public health policy that we have on the books?
So long as the CDC has authorized this under emergency standards, I would say yes. I think when we go to look at the traditional vaccines that everybody, vast majority of people that have faith and confidence in, that are required to access our elementary schools, to go to college, enter the military. People have confidence in those vaccines because of generational trust. We've seen those vaccines for generations. And right now, I think we had a very similar conversation in judiciary on a comparable piece of legislation, in that mandates just never work. Asking to mandate things just never really works to accomplish your goals. If you want to get people to develop faith and trust in a particular thing, whether it be a vaccine or government in general, you have to convince them. You can't coerce them. You can't twist their arm. You can't bribe them with money. You just have to, they have to learn. They have to talk to their neighbors. They have to talk to their doctor or their nurse that lives next door. And their doctor and nurse needs to say, yeah, I got it. And I think it's good. It's not about we as a government coming down and telling people you must do this, especially on something that is so new. And I know that when it comes to those vaccines that people have faith and trust in, I mean, you and I both, when we entered the military, we walked down a line and we got pumped full of vaccines as we entered the military. And we accepted that because we have generational trust. Right now, I think I didn't intend to get into the whys, but I think a lot of people don't have trust in this right now. And until we find a way to gain that trust, mandating, trying to mandate it and force people or twisting their arms is not the way to do it. And the first step in that is, the first step in that is just requiring it for access to something. We're not going to mandate it, but if you want to access a service, you need to get it. And I just don't think that's the best way to go about gaining trust in this vaccine. And again, until the CDC...
Thank you, Mr. Rep. Place, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Until the CDC removes the emergency authorization and it's authorized fully, then I think the discussion changes dramatically.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative McGaw.
Yeah, that was actually my question. Does this, I didn't see in the bill where it would change when this vaccination receives full approval from the FDA. Would that require a separate legislation once it's approved fully?
Well, as I've mentioned both here in immediate appearances, I'm open to this. This legislation was very broadly written to a certain degree. And if this committee, the bill is quite frankly presented to this committee, and if the committee makes a decision to have what is in essence a sunset clause on it, based off of CDC authorizations, FDA authorizations, and things like that, then I couldn't see myself objecting to that personally.
I have one other question, if it's okay, Mr. Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm thinking about some of the businesses or locations where patients may be particularly at risk. As an example, I work in nursing homes every day, and so I know that was a very high-risk population at the beginning. And, there may be patients there who have not been able to get vaccinated or do not get vaccinated, but would be at particular risk. So I'm wondering if there is an opportunity for for exclusions to be made depending on the type of businesses or the type of location, thinking particularly of patients who are most at risk.
Again, I would say that it is the committee's discretion to amend the bill as they wish. That would be something that, again, I personally would have no objection to.
Representative Newberry.
Yeah, I just want to make the observation, Mr. Chairman, in response to most questions. With respect to, you could do a sunset clause as one possibility. Another possibility is with respect to schools, if need be, you could always carve that out because we do have vaccination requirements for schools. With respect to private businesses, my father lives in a nursing home, and it's sort of interesting to go there because they've just started visitation the last few months. But they've been taking precautions. They're not asking people if they have a vaccine or not, but they are making you wear masks, and it's outdoors. And all. There's ways they can protect themselves without requiring. I think the issue here is one of medical privacy. I've said before, I encourage people to get the vaccine, but it's nobody's business if I do or not. That's how I feel about this. I think everybody in this country should feel that way, frankly. And I will tell you that when this is over, the idea that I'm going to go to a shop at a store that requires me to prove my vaccination status ain't going to happen. I will go out of my way to do that. And but private business tends to be of the herd mentality. So I think we need to prevent that from happening. That's just a philosophical objection I have. Not to the bill. That's why the bill's here.
Any further questions for Representative Place? Representative McGaw?
If I may, it's not really a question so much as just a comment that I have significant concerns about this bill. As I said, I was working with the population that was most at risk during COVID-19. I've seen what this virus can do, and I have significant concerns about taking away a tool that the Department of Health and our healthcare workers in general have to keep the people of Rhode Island safe. And so I just want to say that I have significant concerns about this, about the safety. And I understand what you're saying about being a medical choice, but this is really not so much a personal medical health issue as a public health issue. And I think it's important that we take into consideration the health of the people around us as well.
Chairman, do you know if the Department of Health is going to be testifying? Are they on the list? I know they submitted written testimony. Do you know if they're going to actually be testifying, or are they just written?
I believe, just written.
Okay, because I had requested some information. It kind of tags along. It kind of comes along with Representative McGraw's comments in terms of nursing homes and things like that. Because I had requested information from them about, you know, what are the vaccination rates for the employees and the residents of nursing homes. More specifically, I think I asked in terms of the tier 1 when we first started the vaccination process, and they were never able to get me that information. So, you know, again, this just goes back to my understanding is that the rates are somewhere around 40% right now, and I think we just need to tread lightly in terms of, again, asking people to disclose their personal medical information. You know, people, for whatever reason, they've made a decision not to get the vaccine, whatever that decision may be. And for some people, it may be just a philosophical disagreement. For a great many people, it could be medical reasons. It's not for us to make a decision. It's not for us to decide whether or not we should force those people to have to disclose their personal, private medical histories as to why they chose not to get the vaccine. And it goes back to Representative Newberry's point. That is the origin of the bill. Again, I've got within 2 zip codes of my district, you know, under 40% vaccinated, even partially vaccinated rates, not even just being partially vaccinated, under 40%. And I just don't think that they need to disclose personal health information or to get onto a RIPTA bus or to come into to petition their government for a grievance or to have a conversation or to get a license at DMV. And that was the origin of the legislation. And again, the conversation in terms of businesses, you know, I think as Representative Newberry said, it's very concerning that, you know, would we have to disclose that information to access, to go to a Stop and Shop to get basic food necessities. And it's a balance, and it's a discussion that we're going to have. And my understanding, there's a lot of folks that have an opinion on that, and we're going to hear from them here pretty soon.
Absolutely. Any further comments or questions from members of the committee? No. Okay, so before we go to the long list of witnesses that we have signed up, there is one other bill on the calendar that's scheduled for hearing. There are no witnesses signed up. It's House Resolution 6318 from Representative Cortland. It's a resolution that respectfully requests that Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management submit a report on changes to the parking areas under the governance of the Department of Environmental Management. There are no witnesses signed up on this bill, so I just ask that we could do a roll call vote. Is there a motion to hold this bill for further study? Moved by Deputy Whip Ackermann. Is there a second? Seconded by First Vice Chair Messier. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Shanley?
Yes.
First Vice Chair Messier?
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Corvesi? Representative Ackermann?
Yes.
Representative Agello?
Yes.
Representative Baginski?
Yes.
Representative Felix? Representative Hall?
Yes.
Representative Hall? Representative Kennedy?
Yes.
Representative Knight?
Yes.
Representative McGaw?
Yes.
Representative Nardone?
Yes, and would you indicate you heard me?
Yes.
Representative Newberry?
Yes.
Representative Shawcross-Smith?
Yes.
Representative Tanzi?
Yes.
The ayes have it.
Thank you. Representative Cortland is here and available to testify via WebEx. So welcome, Representative.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the committee. Thank you, Chairman. You explained it. It's pretty simple. It's a resolution just requesting DEM report back to us on what they are doing with parking. Particularly, I've asked for all their state parking lots associated with their parks and recreational areas, but particularly shore areas on the shore. I've just been getting a lot of calls about DEM redoing certain parking areas that's resulting in a reduction of parking, and I'm asking if they have any future plans, perhaps from funds from the Green Bond, to expand parking in any other areas. I just know that people are upset about, they're concerned about shoreline access, and parking is a big part of it. And if we're going to be reducing parking areas. I think we should just be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Representative Corcoran? No questions. Thank you very much. So that will conclude testimony on House Resolution 6318. And now we are going to move back to the witness list for Representative Place's bill. And we can start with, all I have is looks like somebody named Mitch. Is Mitch available? Yes. Just bear with us for 1 second. So for those of you waiting to testify on this bill, because we have 65 witnesses signed up, we are going to do a limit on testimony of 2 minutes per witness. So please try and consolidate your thoughts and frame them in a manner that would allow you to complete your testimony within 2 minutes. Is this Mitch?
Hi, no, good afternoon. This is Dr. Michelle Pertella.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you, doctor?
Fine. I'm a pediatrician. I reside in Westerly, Rhode Island, and I wanted to express my support for banning vaccine passports. What I think is very important for legislators to understand is that this is an issue that has bipartisan support. Conservative organizations as well as progressive ones, including the American Civil Liberties Union, decry vaccine passports, particularly digital ones, as a massive violation of privacy. And it risks dividing the population, obviously, into vaccinated and unvaccinated, which will easily allow unjust discrimination to take place based on that status. From a scientific standpoint, the distinction is not necessary. There was a very recent, huge study out of Israel involving over 6 million individuals, 6 million Israelis, that established that individuals who become infected with COVID-19 and recover are as protected as those who are immunized against COVID-19. The researchers themselves said that their subjects who recovered from COVID fared just as well in terms of not getting reinfected nor of suffering severe illness or death. So scientifically speaking, there is not a need to make a distinction between those who are vaccinated or not vaccinated. And if we look at the numbers in Rhode Island, the vast majority of morbidity and death occurred in those over the age of 65. And within that population, already 86% are fully vaccinated. In terms of future epidemics, those are not generated by asymptomatic individuals. And in terms of COVID, what we have seen in terms of young adults and children in particular, they are not the members of the population who catalyze the epidemic. So I very strongly urge you to stand in favor of protecting privacy rights and also to stand with the science that we can attain herd immunity through not through mass mandated vaccination with passports, but through a combination of education, voluntary vaccination, and also rest assured that those who have been infected naturally and recovered that they too contribute to the herd immunity for the whole community. So please vote in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Any questions for the doctor from members of the committee? No questions. Thank you very much. Next witness we have signed up is Richard Rainville. We had Mr. Rainville, so just bear with us as we try and get him back. Good afternoon, Mr. Rainville.
How you doing?
We're doing well, sir. We're here discussing House Bill 6302. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Thank you and welcome.
How you doing? Thank you. I'm for this bill, the vaccination passport. Nobody should be dictating you to walk into a building, any school, any private sector. That's a violation of your Constitution and your medical rights. It's plain and simple. There's no other. It's a common sense bill. So I'm with it 100%. And that's basically all I got to say.
Well stated. Any questions from members of the committee? No, sir, that was for if any members of the committee might have any questions for you about your testimony. Seeing none, thank you again for calling in, Mr. Rainville. Have an excellent evening. The next witness we have signed up is Sherry Wallach. Good afternoon, Sherry. This is the House Committee on State Government and Elections. We're here discussing House Bill 6302, and you are signed up both in opposition to and in support of this bill.
Sorry.
You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes or less.
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry, this is in support of this bill. My first, it was a mistake, the first submission. Anyways, my name is Sherry, calling in support of this bill. I think it's really important to listen to a story, a personal testimony like mine. I am somebody with an autoimmune ulcerative colitis. My GI specialist and I have talked thoroughly about this, as well as my primary care doctor. For somebody like me who's in complete remission, no meds, and, you know, has been hospitalized in the past, they do not recommend this vaccine for me. So having said that, if I do not get a COVID vaccine and we issue COVID passports out there, I will not be able to go on public transportation or certain restaurants, bars. And that's because I have, you know, medical reasons right now. There are no longitudinal studies yet to know whether the long-term risks will be more severe for me than getting COVID itself. I am not a walking vector for this infection. I actually take really good care of my health. So I think this is a slippery slope that we want to ask for, you know, a vaccine passport and a one-size-fits-all solution to our public health and infectious disease. Unfortunately, people are different. They are unable to take, you know, certain medications. Other people are not able to take, you know, a vaccine right to their, crossing their blood-brain barrier. It's just not public health safety to recommend and force this on an entire generation and population, especially given individual medical history and facts. So I really urge the committee here to strongly support this bill. This is like an emergency situation, so we are not treated like second-class citizens because we are making informed decisions at this point. In 10 years, 15 years down the line, we still are going to be collecting data on this vaccine. So again, I urge you to support this bill.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. Any questions from members of the committee for Ms. Wallach? Thank you again for calling in. The next witness we have signed up is Douglas McCusker. Good afternoon, Mr. McCusker. We're here discussing House Bill 6302. You have the floor. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Doug McCusker of Warwick. I want to thank you for hearing my testimony today. I'm a firm believer that my health records are my personal records. and not available for general consumption. And I'm also under the impression that they're protected under the existing HIPAA laws. I also am a firm believer that I shouldn't have to prove anything to conduct my business and move freely within Rhode Island or America for that matter. This bill affirms my right to privacy and my protections under the Constitution. I'm a 20-year Air Force veteran. I served so freedoms and liberties could be retained. And it seems to me to be common sense for anyone who's sworn an oath to uphold and defend our Constitution that they should in fact support this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your service and thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee for Mr. McCusker? Thank you again for calling in. The next witness we have signed up is Madalena Sirignata. Is Madalena available? Good evening, Madalena. Welcome. You have the floor to testify.
Hi, good evening. My name is Madalena. I support House Bill 6302 for a plethora of reasons, starting with the fact that COVID vaccines have not yet been shown to reduce viral transmission. Clinical trials were only designed to evaluate a reduction in symptoms, not transmission of the virus. Who's to say that vaccinated people aren't becoming asymptomatic carriers? In the absence of data, the assumption that vaccines reduce transmission is just that, an assumption. And it's based on a belief system rather than actual evidence. How is it ethical to mandate a multi-billion-dollar for-profit product that is completely liability-free should the recipient be injured, when the product hasn't even demonstrated that it will contribute to herd immunity? And what about those people who've already had COVID and now have a robust immunity to the virus? Will they be forced to take experimental products in order to work and support their families, to buy groceries, to attend school? What about those with underlying health conditions that don't qualify for a medical exemption? In order to receive a medical exemption, you have to prove that a particular vaccine has injured you. You can't get an exemption without first being hurt by the vaccine. This violates bodily autonomy. Alarmingly, the deaths and serious adverse events that are being reported to the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System by the thousands are being systematically dismissed as coincidental. We don't have adequate safety data. It is reckless and decidedly unscientific to assume that all reported injuries are a coincidence. Not only have tens of thousands of people reported serious injuries, but according to HHS, less than 1% of vaccine adverse events are ever reported in the first place. Where is the follow-up to these reports? Everyone in Rhode Island, especially the most vulnerable to COVID, have had an opportunity to receive the vaccine. Forcing it on someone who doesn't want it, particularly because of medical conditions that don't qualify for an exemption, means that one life is more valuable than another. Is it not just as tragic to die or be injured by a COVID vaccine as by COVID? How is it ethical to remove a person's right to avoid risk where they perceive it to be greatest? Do we no longer own our own bodies? Both the World Health Organization and the ACLU oppose COVID vaccine passports, citing lack of evidence that vaccines reduce viral transmission, that vaccine passports exacerbate equity concerns, and allow for grievous violations of privacy and medical data mining. In conclusion, I would like to quote the ACLU, who has pointed out that vaccine passports, and I quote, will have a particular chilling effect on communities of color, including immigrant communities that are already over-policed. Fear of tracking could lead people to opt out of participation, resulting in further marginalization as they are denied access to certain public spaces. Worse, without privacy protections strong enough to create public confidence, it could even deter people from getting vaccinated in the first place. I urge you to please protect our communities from COVID vaccine passports, from medical discrimination, and from further erosion of trust in our health agencies. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee for Madalena? No questions. Thank you again. The next witness we have signed up is Joseph Daly. Good afternoon, Mr. Daly. You have the floor to testify in House Bill 6302. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me here today. We all agree that one death from COVID is a tragedy, but isn't one death related to vaccine injury also a tragedy? Vaccine passports ignore the very real danger of injury and death from vaccines. Thankfully, most of you here have never had to deal with the horrific experience of getting a vaccine, thinking that you're doing the right thing for yourself, your child, or a loved one, and dealing with the fallout of a serious adverse injury. It's a real tragedy in reality for many people. The COVID vaccines alone have had over 4,000 deaths associated with them after vaccination. For a normal drug fully approved by the FDA, normally it would be pulled from the market after only 50 deaths reported afterwards. How can we justify vaccine passports when so many injuries and so many deaths have already been reported? Now, many of you and many people in Rhode Island want to get the vaccine, and that's their right, and no one is stopping them. The public health tool of vaccination is not being stopped. What is simply happening is that we need to protect those people for whom there is no screening being done, who might be at risk for an injury. There is no screening. We know the comorbidities that make people die from COVID. What are the comorbidities? What are the genetic mutations? What are the predispositions? What are the autoimmune conditions that might lead someone to being injured by a vaccine? You cannot mandate this. You cannot allow vaccine passports to stop the folks of Rhode Island who know that this could be dangerous for them or who are questioning it, to stop them from leading a normal life. I urge all the lawmakers here to please support this bill. So many of us really need your help. Apart from water, there is no single thing that we put in our bodies that every single person in the world should be having to take. Allergies aside, name one thing. It doesn't exist. There's a risk with everything, and an unapproved vaccine is no different. There is a high risk. Please support this bill. Thank you for listening to the people of Rhode Island and protecting us.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. Any questions from members of the committee? Representative McGaw has a question for you, Mr. Daly.
I'm sorry, Mr. Daly, you mentioned the number of deaths associated with COVID vaccines. Can you please clarify where that number came from?
He's gone. Okay. Well, maybe next time. Next witness we have signed up is Andrew Bostom, or Dr. Andrew Bostom. Good afternoon, Dr. Bostom. We're here discussing House Bill 6302. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes or less. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. The following very understated self-explanatory comment is from a CDC document entitled Questions and Answers, Vaccine Against 2001 H1N1 Influenza Virus. And I quote, if you have had 2009 H1N1 flu as confirmed by an RT-PCR test, you should have some immunity against 2009 H1N1 flu and can choose not to get the 2009 H1N1 vaccine, unquote. Fast forward just over a decade later, and after intensive investigation for the past 16 months, both laboratory and real-world clinical data demonstrate convalescent, unvaccinated COVID-19 immunity is just as robust as vaccine-acquired COVID-19 immunity. Indeed, multiple laboratory studies conducted by highly respected U.S. and European academic research groups have reported that convalescent, mildly or severely infected SARS-CoV-2, that's COVID-19 patients who are unvaccinated, can have greater virus-neutralizing immunity, especially more versatile, long-enduring T-cell immunity relative to vaccinated individuals who are never infected. An enormous real-world Israeli national follow-up study of approximately 6.4 million individuals demonstrated clearly that naturally acquired COVID-19 convalescence immunity was equivalent to vaccine-acquired immunity in preventing COVID-19 infection, morbidity, and mortality, faring at least as well as those vaccinated. 187,549 unvaccinated COVID-19 positive persons who tested positive between June 1st, 2020 to September 30th, 2020, and were followed through March 20th, 2021, revealed only 894, that's 0.48%, were reinfected, 38, 0.02 were hospitalized. A mere 16, 0.08% hospitalized with severe disease, and only one out of 187,549 died. That individual was over 80 years old. The Israeli investigators concluded, quote, "Our results question the need to vaccinate previously infected individuals," unquote. Pooled with vaccine-acquired immunity, i.e. unvaccinated with natural immunity, plus vaccinated, Rhode Island has achieved de facto herd immunity in terms of clinical COVID-19 disease. COVID-19 hospitalizations and deaths are at low background rates consistent with a very manageable endemic disease like seasonal influenza. Moreover, and concordant with these reassuring data, while approximately 90% of Rhode Island's COVID-19 mortality was accrued among those 65 plus years old, as of Friday, May 14th, 92.4% of that age group had been partially vaccinated and 86.1% fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Epidemic spread of COVID-19, like all other respiratory viruses, again, notably influenza, is driven by symptomatic persons. Asymptomatic spread is trivial and inconsequential. A meta-analysis of contact tracing studies published in the Journal of the American Medical Association showed asymptomatic COVID-19 spread was 0.7%. In conclusion, a rational, ethical, true prevention model alternative to vaccine passports would be simple notifications as part of formal policies by public agencies and businesses that persons with active symptomatic febrile, feverish respiratory illnesses stay home from work and refrain from patronizing business. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Dr. Boston. Any questions from members of the committee? No questions. Thank you again for calling in. The next witness we have signed up is Maureen Poplawski. Good afternoon, Maureen. We're here discussing Representative Place's bill. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes or less. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Maureen Poplawski, and I'm here today to ask you to consider this bill to provide for basically the medical freedom of every single Rhode Islander. As you know, and I'm sure many folks have said in the testimony, that this drug is still in an experimental stage. All of the vaccines that are approved right now, none of them have been fully tested with animals. It's my understanding that there are other companies that are also looking at trials for a COVID vaccine where we may see a more traditional approach to a vaccine where you're actually given part of that substance rather than using some kind of experimental gene therapy that has never been tried before, basically. In the meantime, our focus should be on treatment and allowing all voices on the subject to be heard. I've done quite a bit of research on it myself and have watched articles just disappear from the internet that are not promoting vaccine. There are several doctors around the world that have treatment protocols that could have saved millions of lives of anyone that had COVID. Instead of waiting for folks to get to the hospital, treatment could be given immediately at home to lessen the symptoms and to reduce the hospitalization. Many of those doctors have been forced to remove their content from the internet or social media. I find that to be a travesty. If the vaccine is so good, let there be free sharing of those ideas. And if you and the media is totally covering these other ways of thinking up. So the other reason would be the HIPAA privacy laws that would allow me to protect, as a citizen, my medical information. I should not have to disclose anything about what vaccines I've had or what medication I'm taking or anything to get treatment. I fear in the future that this passport could be used to actually deny people their medical treatment. They wouldn't be allowed in hospitals.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Maureen. Are there any questions from members of the committee for Ms. Poplawski? Thank you again for calling in. The next witness we have signed up is Kathleen Bennett. And Deborah O'Leary is the next witness we have signed up in support. Folks, I'll remind you, we have a lot of witnesses, so I would encourage everybody not to read a statement, but to kind of listen to what others have said and add your own unique twist or perspective or insights to the conversation. Ms. O'Leary, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to testify in support of House 6302. I sincerely wish this bill was not necessary. Vaccine passports are based on fear, not science. How many times in the last year have you heard public health officials change their recommendations while continuing to use the phrase to keep us safe? A little over a year ago, we declared war on SARS-CoV-2. We were all scared. We allowed the fear to fester, and in doing so, we declared a war on ourselves. The death and illness from this virus is actual, but it sent the world into panic mode. Mistakes were made by health officials, our government, and the media. And I believe, what I believe to be the most severe effect of COVID-19 virus is the easy way it has succeeded in causing panic and fear of our own human friends and relatives. In 2 weeks, to flatten the curve turned into a year of restrictions affecting our financial well-being, access to government, our children's education, our human relationships, and even our physical and mental health. Keeping us safe has now evolved into restricting access to only those who agree to participate in a phase 3 clinical trial of an experimental vaccine based on fear of a virus which has a 98% survival rate. Rights to informed consent and bodily autonomy would be extinguished if vaccine passports were to be enacted in Rhode Island. For those, for whatever reason, choose not to get the vaccine, they would become second-class citizens. We know that adverse events from all 3 vaccines can be life-threatening. Over 4,000 reported deaths so far to the government website, www.vaers.gov, which is the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. We are telling everyone, regardless of their medical history or prior infection with the COVID, to be vaccinated. So how would requiring vaccination and documentation of such passports keep everyone safe? I don't know, but I certainly do know it wouldn't keep us free. The bill will protect our rights for now. I implore you to pass this bill out of committee and send it to the General Assembly for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you again. Next witness we have signed up is Jennifer Field. Good afternoon, Ms. Field. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Thank you and welcome.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Jennifer Field, and I have a 10-year-old daughter. I've never done this before, but I just felt really compelled to speak out. We're incredibly uncomfortable with the COVID vaccine right now, and we would really prefer to wait for the trials to come to an end before we decide what is good or not good for our family. And I just feel like that is a decision that is made between our doctor and our family and not the government. And the idea that we would need this vaccine to do things that we're already allowed to do, go to school, go to a store, take a vacation, fly on a plane, it's really scary. It's really scary. And I guess I'm nervous, and I sound a little bit upset right now because I am. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate you calling in. I think it's important for everyone to note that at this time, the governor has indicated that he's going to be imposing what's called the honor system and rely on people to self-report whether they've been vaccinated and behave accordingly. So right now, it doesn't seem like there's a situation where legislation like this would be applicable in Rhode Island. So hopefully that helps to temper some of the fears that people have calling in. Next witness we have signed up is Jessica Shea. Good afternoon, Ms. Shea. Can you turn down your television, please? Can you hear us?
Hi, so sorry.
That's okay. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. It's just going to be a quick statement. I just honestly don't believe we should have passports for vaccines. It seems unconstitutional to require people to carry documents to prove something like that. But that's basically all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members of the committee? Thank you again for
No,
calling
I
in.
thank you. I thank you for your time, and I appreciate all the work you guys have done for our state and our communities. Thank you.
Have a great evening. Next witness we have signed up is James Randolph Bayajaran. James, we'll try again. The next witness after that is Elaine L. Be patient as we try and get Elaine L. Then after that, we have Rebecca Campbell and Michelle Ritter. So if you're listening in, you're coming up soon. Good afternoon, Rebecca. You're here before the House Committee on State Government and Elections, and you have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes or less. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Representative Shanley. I've been actually listening, and I did just want to comment, with basically just what you had just said about the governor with the honor system. This is all moving really quickly for all of us. I called in on 5989 about 6 weeks ago regarding the vaccine passport or some similar. It is moving quick. And I think that we need to, I'm in support of this bill. We need to recognize that I'm dealing with this as a parent at the high school level where we have vaccine clinics. Kids are getting coerced. There are incentivizing regarding prom. It's pretty intense. I have a senior going to college out of state. They're also risking not being able to attend college without receiving this EUA vaccine or shot and living a normal college life as far as accessing buildings. And it's quoted here that if unable to mandate the COVID vaccine, we should strongly encourage all to get vaccinated and to develop incentives for students to get vaccinated. These incentives could affect access to rec centers, student activity, and dining. So this is happening. So I do ask that all of our legislators understand that there are constituents that can't get this vaccine. How are we going to protect those people that can't, if we do have a vaccine passport, not be able to work and provide for their families? We're considering if this bill doesn't pass and Rhode Island does have a vaccine passport down the road, that we would have to move because we are strongly, at this point, not comfortable receiving this shot that is under EUA. So as a Rhode Islander for 20 years, I do hope that you understand that there are people that are strongly opposed to this and that we're asking for you to help the people and support protect our rights. So I appreciate the time. Representative Plate, thank you so much for the courage to stand up for this. This is definitely down the pike, and what we're seeing is moving very, very quick. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee? No questions. Thank you again. Next witness we have signed up is Hida Gardner. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Hida. How are you?
Yes, good. How are you?
Good. We're here taking testimony on the House Committee on State Government and Elections. You've signed up in support of Representative Place's bill. You have 2 minutes to testify. Thank you and welcome.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to testify. I'm calling you to support House Bill 6302 to support vaccine passport. To stop vaccine passport, I oppose mandatory COVID injections, vaccine passports, and tracking and tracing apps. I should have free choice to determine if I want a COVID shot. Neither government nor private corporations nor schools have the right to force anyone to have a so-called vaccine passport, nor should an app that contains my private medical information and that tracks and traces my movement be permitted. The idea of a vaccine passport did not begin with COVID and will not end with COVID. Such a medical or health digital passport presents a serious threat to freedom and choice. My private medical decision regarding a COVID shot or other vaccine should not determine whether I can leave my home, work, shop, dine, or worship. I have emailed in my written testimony about the vaccination being an experimental gene therapy, where vaccine developers have mentioned the never-before authorized mRNA approach as a means of programming a person's cells, and Moderna's terminology as deploying a new software. Pfizer and Moderna have used lipid nanoparticles coated with polyethylene glycol, a synthetic, non-degradable, and controversial polymer associated with adverse immune responses. Moderna acknowledges that its lipid nanoparticles could lead to significant adverse events. The FDA has also identified polyethanol glycol as a possible culprit responsible for anaphylactic reactions to the COVID-19 injections. There have been 4,057 deaths reported as of May 7, 2021 in the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. This can be found at www.openvaers.com. So this experimentation against the Nuremberg Code, this is against the Nuremberg Code, as this has only been approved for emergency use authorization. So I stand firmly opposed to any mandatory vaccines or so-called vaccine passport and urge you to fight against this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee? No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yep, we do have a question. Representative.
Not a question so much as a comment.
Representative McGaw.
I've heard several people testifying about the data from the VA-ERS data system. So just so that the people on the committee are familiar and those calling in, a note specifically from the CDC website states that the VA-ERS is an early warning system. It's used to monitor adverse events that happen after vaccination. This is all self-reported data, and that it's a frontline system that the FDA then goes through to get further information on that. So this is self-reported data that has not yet been analyzed by the FDA. And so to say that there are 4,000 deaths associated with this vaccine, just so that everyone is clear that that has not yet been evaluated by the FDA, that these are self-reported, it's self-reported information, and there are many articles out there that talk about some of the specific information that's in that, and many of them are shown not to be related to the COVID vaccine at all. So just so that people have an understanding of what VA-ERS system is, that it's a self-reporting system that then the FDA has to go in and evaluate later.
Okay. Any further questions or comments from members of the committee or their pets? All right, next witness we have available is Eric Broomfield. Good afternoon, Mr. Broomfield. How are you?
Couldn't be better. Who do I have the pleasure of speaking with?
Evan Shanley. Thank you for joining us today. We're here discussing vaccine mandates, and you have the floor to testify. So go ahead.
So I signed the form and said I'd be willing to testify because I can't think of a more important issue than the freedom, medical freedom. Basically, I have my own experiences with vaccines with my son, who had some issues with a vaccine and some allergic reactions when he was a child. But for me, that's not the issue, whether or not they're effective or safe. The issue for me, and I think for a lot of people, is that medical freedom is essential in a free world or a free country. You know, sovereignty of our own body and our own health decisions, the freedom to take a vaccine if we choose to, or to not choose to, and also the freedom to not be persecuted if we're in one of those groups. Just, I can't imagine a scarier scenario than being absolutely forced to put medical interventions, necessary or not, in our bodies. And so that's it in a nutshell. I don't have, you know, there's not much more to say than that. I just think it's extremely important. The slippery slope is obvious. And that's all. I just wanted to go on record with whatever other people were willing and just get that out there.
Very well stated. Any questions for Mr. Broomfield from members of the committee? No questions. Thank you again for calling in, Mr. Broomfield. Next witness we have signed up is Hannah Cipriano. Good evening, Ms. Cipriano. We're here discussing Representative Place's bill. You have the floor to testify. Please try to limit your testimony to 2 minutes or less.
Okay, thank you. So, my name is Hannah Cipriano. I currently live in Central Falls, but I was raised in East Providence, Rhode Island. I'm 24 years old, and I have one child who is 4 years old. I am against this bill for vaccine passports because I think it infringes on our rights, and I understand that a lot of people can get the COVID vaccine, but there are some people that are injured by vaccines. My grandmother has been injured by vaccines. My mother has been injured by a MMR vaccine that was taken off the market in the 60s. She has chronic rheumatoid arthritis because of it. I was injured by vaccines, and so was my son. And I understand that the COVID vaccine does not have a virus in it, and it is not similar to the other vaccines that are on the market, but this vaccine was only approved for emergency use because the COVID-19 vaccine is not a vaccine with a virus, so it uses a spike protein, and the spike protein is similar to the spike protein that the coronavirus produces, but your body doesn't like the spike protein, so it's going to give you immunity by attacking cells that your body is making a fake spike protein from, and I really haven't found any science on the epigenetic implications of the vaccine. Epigenetics is the study of how your genes are changed through environmental causes. So that is why I am opposed to vaccine passports, because it wouldn't be fair to force people to take something and not be able to participate in society, which is our main means of survival nowadays. So I'm against that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions for Ms. Cipriano from members of the committee? No questions.
Thank you. Bye.
Next witness we have signed up is Patricia Yauman. Good evening, Patricia. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, my name is Tricia Yeoman, and I truly appreciate everyone's attention on me as I speak with you today. As a Rhode Island citizen, I have never, ever been more concerned about my way of life as I am today, and I urge you to support Bill 6302. I personally feel that discrimination in any form is wrong, and implementation of a COVID-19 passport would be pure discrimination. I cannot be denied services by any business in this state because of my race, religion, color of my skin. However, a vaccine passport would deny me access to these businesses and services, which is wrong. And I also believe that implementing a COVID-19 passport would create a two-tiered society, those that have the shot and those that have legally elected not to. And that's wrong. Can you imagine the potential bullying of those that have not been fitting in? And where would it stop? So the other thing that I feel is that vaccine passports would render our HIPAA laws useless. With vaccine passports, we know each other's private health information. It'd be like wearing a yellow star on your shirt and showing your papers everywhere. I can imagine, sadly, a world in which I cannot travel, couldn't go to a sports event, enter a workplace, local grocery store unless I have my proper credentials. I would not be free anymore. And, you know, there's also so much tracking going on of my personal information out there by the big tech giants, Google, Amazon, Facebook, etc. And it's mined and sold for huge profit. No personal gain to me, but I can only imagine, again, what's going to be done with this vaccine passport data, allowing who knows who entry into my medical records, and who's it going to be sold to, and what would they do with this information that's garnered from not just me, but every other Rhode Islander? Where would my privacy be? And in our beautiful state whose motto is hope, I can only hope that you, our elected representatives, no matter what your party affiliation, will agree that a vaccine passport is wrong. Freedom means my health choices are up to me, and I strongly support that you pass this bill. Thank you so much for your time and allowing me to share my thoughts.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee? No questions. Chairman Corvesi, would you like your votes recorded?
So first, let me say my apologies for being tardy. I had a couple of emergencies that made me a little late. I certainly want to vote yes on 6002. I think out of an abundance of caution, I should probably recuse myself from 5887 and 5888 because my son-in-law is one of the sits on the Board of Trustees of URI, and while neither of those bills single him out specifically, I think it would just be prudent for me to recuse myself from both of those bills. The only other thing I would like to say, since we're on, I assume we're on 6302, is I've had a number of constituents call me in the last 24 hours on this bill, and I certainly support this bill very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next witness we have signed up is Heather Murphy. Good evening, Ms. Murphy. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I'm Heather Murphy, and I live in North Kingstown, Rhode Island. I wanted to just touch base with you because for our entire existence, well, for my entire existence, we have all afforded the right to choose what medical interventions we want. We take on our own values, personal health history, and family circumstances to make our decisions. We all used to live in a world where this, along with informed consent, was protected and valued. One of the beauties of our democracy is to give an individual free choice and personal responsibility for their own lives and their own health. As a member of the medical community in this state, I have protected these medical rights for all my patients, and it feels like an idea of a vaccine passport would just support a world of control and socialism. Now, I fully support vaccination, but I do not support vaccine passports as a means to live freely in our democracy. Also, the FDA has very clearly protected informed consent rights for quite a while, and one of those essential elements is a careful consideration about the process so to minimize the possibility of coercion or undue influence. Undue influence occurs through an offer of excessive, unwarranted, inappropriate, or improper rewards or other overture in order to obtain compliance. Having a vaccine passport essentially would violate this and is inappropriate and improper reward to live freely in our society. Once I fully support vaccination, again, I have to say that, but we cannot start taking people and making them and forcing them to do these things. Once we start separating our citizens by their medical decision making, we've lost our democracy and we've given into socialism. You all have a duty to protect our freedoms in this state, so I urge you to pass this bill and not allow vaccine passports to exist. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee?
No, I don't think so. It's the first time I've ever done this and spoke to the committee, so
Okay.
I wasn't prepared with questions.
Well, that's fine. So maybe next time.
Yes.
Next witness that we have signed up is Alexandra Madej. Good evening, Alexandra. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Alexandra lives in the house behind me. Welcome.
Oh, yes. Hi, Evan. How are you?
I'm doing well. You're signed up here to testify on House Bill 6302, and you have the floor to testify. Try to limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Honorable legislators of State Government and Elections Committee, thank you for your service to the people of Rhode Island, and thank you for hearing this bill today. I am very much in support of passing it. I think it's critically important to protect people's right to decide what goes into their bodies, and this bill is one way to do that. I strongly oppose all vaccine passports, particularly for this new experimental medical procedure for COVID-19 vaccination. Healthcare decisions are unique to each person, since individuals have unique biology, circumstances, and religious beliefs. Vaccines are a medical procedure that come with a risk of injury, and they are all liability-free for the manufacturers. Where there is a risk, there must be a choice. If businesses are requiring that people undergo a medical procedure in order to enter their building, this means that people are being coerced into a medical procedure that has risks, and they cannot even sue the manufacturer for damages if they are harmed. This would deny certain people access to goods and services based on their medical condition and vaccination status. This is completely unacceptable and must not be allowed to happen. The COVID-19 injection has not been proven to prevent infection nor transmission of the virus to others. It may actually create more asymptomatic carriers. Requiring people to take it in order to be active in society would be an incredibly poor public health policy at best. I believe if vaccine passports are allowed to become law, it would be the beginning of the end of civilization as we know it. If people are mandated to inject experimental therapies into their bodies in order to fully participate in society, this sets a very dangerous precedent for other things that can be mandated in the future. Please support H 6302 and bring it to the House floor for a vote. Thank you for your consideration in this serious matter and your resolve to serve your constituents.
Thank you very much for calling in, Alexandra. Do any of the members of the committee have any questions for Alexandra? No. Okay. You're off the hook. Thank you again for calling in. Oh, we have one question.
No, I don't have a question. I just want to be marked present. And
Representative Hull can he be marked present? Representative Hull, do you want your votes recorded on the 3 items that we voted on the calendar in the 4 bills we held for further study?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
And in the affirmative on those votes, Chairman?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Next witness we have signed up is Deborah Jennings. Good evening, Ms. Jennings. We're here discussing House Bill 6302. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes or less. Thank you and welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman Shanley. My name's Deborah Jennings. I'm a registered nurse. I live in Middletown, and I have a vaccine injury from the hepatitis B vaccine, and that I have an autoimmune form of arthritis. I do not have a medical exemption because no doctor will recognize that that came from that vaccine. I'm really almost at a point of being terrified by this vaccine that's rolled out because I've done quite extensive study on this vaccine and that it's not a vaccine. It's a computer operating system. It's software. It's genetically engineered. It's there to enter our cells and command our whole response as a human being to generate the spike protein which I allege to be a bioweapon. It's been made in a Petri dish in a laboratory. This has been pretty clear. I follow many of the doctors that are in the trenches that already provided relief to their patients with any number of forms of the hydrochloroquine, the ivermectin, the budesonide. There was any number of treatments, vitamin C, ozone therapies. How this ever got emergency use authorization is beyond me. If we have medicinals that cure. We're looking, I can go back to the swine flu of 1976, and there were 500 people with the vaccine that were injured with the Guillain-Barré disease, and there were 25 deaths, and that whole program was stopped. We are looking at horrendous injuries from this vaccine. I have eyeballed footage of over 30 to 50. The Veris report is reporting 4,000, and we are hearing that they are 3 months backlogged. We also know from a Harvard research that only 1 to 10% of these injuries are ever reported. So we may be looking at 40,000 or more injuries. The media is complicit in this. We need to stand firm as right instilled to us by our forefathers. We have the template. It's in our Constitution. It's enshrined in the Rhode Island Constitution. We have international law. We even have the CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices that affirmed in August of 2020 that...
Can you wrap up your testimony, Ms. Jennings? You're well over the 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You cannot be making this mandatory. And OSHA's also come out with a statement now that employers better be really looking closely at how they're going to take care of their injured employees if they mandate that. That would go the same with the institutions. I just ask that everybody take a good look at this. Let's roll it back because we're in uncharted territory. Thank you very much. And thank you for those that proposed this bill and to the committee hearing these.
Thank you very much for calling in and for your testimony. Are there any questions for Ms. Jennings from members of the committee? No questions. Thank you. Next witness we have signed up is Amy Gardner. Good evening, Ms. Gardner. We're here discussing House Bill 6302. You are signed up in support and have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes or less. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Amy Gardner with Health Choice Rhode Island, and I am in full support of Bill 6302. Medical decisions should be private no matter which kind of a medical choice, and that includes vaccines. This narrative that a vaccine is somehow not private or its own category is a slippery slope and shouldn't even be a consideration, as we should be making sure that the Fourth Amendment and being safe and secure within our papers is upheld. And unfortunately, we are at a point where a piece of legislation like this is actually necessary, as we already have colleges and other places announcing that they do want to have to require some form of proof in order to walk through the door. That's a form of medical tyranny, something that we should not accept, and basically is not learning from history with the, it's unfortunate I have to quote it, but basically a Nazi situation of show me your papers. That is not where we should be or even be considering, especially in a state like Rhode Island where we were founded on religious freedom, and there is so many things in regards to this where people would have religious objections. So I truly believe that no reason should we not want to pass this and pass it with an absolute quickness, is with a virus that is 98% survival rate marked down. Also that they are saying within the studies so far that this might be something that you either need annually or biannually. And in something like that, that is definitely that much more of a reason why for this particular kind of a virus, that there should be absolutely no reason why we're choosing to require, whether it is in an experimental stage or in fully FDA-approved stage, we should always protect the Fourth Amendment, our privacy, our medical choices, and I highly support and hope everyone in the committee does too to protect the Rhode Islanders in this state. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Do members of the committee have any questions for the witness? No questions. Thank you again. The next witness we have signed up is Nancy Blaze. Good evening, Nancy. We're here discussing House Bill 6302. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. Could you remind me of the bill?
6302 on vaccine passports, so to speak.
Okay. I believe as an American, we have the right to our privacy of our physical and mental capacities. These should not be extorted for any reason. They are rights. They are our rights. They are the Constitution of the United States of America. As a citizen, I believe we should not be forced into anything that is not constitutional. And that is my right.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions from committee members for Ms. Blaze? No questions. Thank you again for calling in. The next witness we have signed up is Kin Lanawi. Good evening, Kim. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you, Rep. Shanley. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Today, I ask that you support Bill H6302 and protect our right to make our own medical decisions. Medical decisions, of course, should be made by individuals and their families without fear of coercion or fear of any negative consequence. I know that, the governor did say that, we were going to be just left to make good choices on our own and that we were not going to be required to show any proof of vaccination. But I can tell you that my 17-year-old son has already felt the pressure of coercion to get this vaccine, as well as the sting of discrimination at his job in a local restaurant industry. He is only 17 years old, and as soon as the vaccine was made available to his age group, his manager at work and several other people that he works with began to pressure him to get the vaccine, not understanding his personal medical situation, or actually that, as Dr. Boston said, he's already been infected with COVID and therefore has the antibodies that offer him protection. But even further, last week when Governor McKee lifted restrictions and said that masking would be only left to people who are vaccinated, my son was taken aside and told that he would be tagged as the only unvaccinated person in his place of business. Of course, the tagging is going to be by virtue of the fact that he will be the only person in the restaurant required to mask. This is a clear violation of HIPAA and is essential, is essentially the same as, some other people have said, putting a star on him and making him feel quite uncomfortable. He came home very upset that night and said that he was going to quit his job. So this is already happening, and I fear it will just happen more as we're going forward. And I really urge you to support this bill, and it is vital to keep us a free people and to keep our medical choices our own. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee? No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Representative Knight.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just take this opportunity to say that we've heard a couple of witnesses reference Nazi Germany, and in the last caller, she said that her son being pressed for his vaccination status was the equivalent of putting a star on him. I want to register through the chair my strong objection to such language. I know it comes from the public and everyone's free to talk as they see fit to their elected officials, but there is simply no equating the issue that we're discussing today with the racist pogrom that eliminated 6 million people of my wife's ancestors and members of my faith. And I strongly object to it.
Objection noted. Thank you, Representative Knight.
Thank you.
Any other members of the committee with comments at this time? Seeing none, the next witness that we have signed up is Sarah Alvazores. Good evening, Sarah. We're here discussing House Bill 6302. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes or less. Thank you and welcome.
Hi, I'm calling today in strong support of House Bill 6302 on behalf of myself and my husband, an Army veteran and service-injured amputee. Beginning in April of 2020, everything closed. Schools, churches, businesses. In May, we opened back up, but with new recommendations. Face masks became the law of the land, whether or not you personally believed in or wanted to practice it. Now, I understand that this has been a challenging year for the entire country, but some families are shouldering a much heavier burden than others. Second-class citizens already exist. As Torah-observant Christians, we decided not to place faith in a veil around our faces. Instead, we made logical, evidence-based changes aimed at maintaining and promoting health. Unfortunately, we learned that without this outward symbol of social acceptability, you're not considered an equal person with equal rights. State executive orders reading, "Nothing in this order shall require a store or other place of business to refuse entry to a customer not wearing a face covering," did little to mitigate the dehumanizing discrimination that our family has repeatedly been subjected to since the start of this pandemic. We've been denied access to private businesses that exist to serve the public, as well as tax-funded offices and buildings alike. Allowing businesses to seek proof of vaccination upon entry for employment or enjoyment degrades medical privacy and completely desecrates the civil liberties that service members like my husband dedicated themselves to preserve by life or limb. The public desperately needs you, our elected officials, to step in and pass this important anti-discrimination bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee for Sarah? No questions. Thank you again for calling in. The next witness we'll go to is Audra Couture. Looks like we'll go. Good afternoon, Dennis. We're here discussing House Bill 6302. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes or less. Thank you and welcome.
All right. Thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to let me speak. And let me just state that I do strongly support this bill. And I'm actually find it a little ridiculous that we have to even discuss this. as a free country and a free person in this country, that I would even have to defend myself in regards to a passport for an experimental gene therapy. I feel like if there's one thing we've learned over the past year, in my opinion, is that the government is not in our best interest. And the fact that they made us wear face masks well, continue to make us wear face masks is ridiculous, because the face masks either work or they don't work. And you either open everything up because they do work, or you take them off because they don't. And now you're going to make us have a passport to do anything. So I strongly support your bill, or this bill. And I would also like to say that the people that are against this bill are the same people that will scream in your face that it's my body, my choice. But they won't allow us to have my body, my choice when it comes to a vaccine. And you can't have it both ways. And I just find the whole thing a little ridiculous. And I am not going to be treated as a second-class citizen because I refuse to put a experimental drug in my body, especially when there's plenty of proof from over 600 doctors that say there are therapeutics, including hydroxychloroquine, that works. And I just want to say that my faith is in God and in Jesus Christ, his son, not in a face mask or in experimental drugs. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Agello, do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I have a question for the gentleman who just spoke.
Dennis Campbell.
Dennis, hello. I hope you're well today. You mentioned the folks who say my body, my choice. Count me among them. And I am curious, you're talking about your body, your choice. Does that extend to allowing women the access to abortion up until the time of fetal viability, or later, should it be necessary for their health?
I think Mr. Campbell has logged off. An interesting question. Next witness we have signed up is Donison Allen. Good afternoon, Donison. We're here discussing House Bill 6302. You are signed up in support, and you have the floor to testify. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do support House Bill 6302. I've heard a lot of testimony to the effects of the vaccine and the concerns for individual freedoms and personal protections. The thing that I'd like to focus on is simply to state that the purpose of government is to protect individual rights. And in a state of emergency, which was declared well over a year ago, we understood that the threat to our healthcare system was in jeopardy. And we have since come to the understanding that there are many ways to deal with this, and we've managed to get that situation under control. So the state of emergency, which granted wide powers to the governor, has come and gone. And we're at the point now where we have to understand that focusing on the purpose of government to protect our rights should be first and foremost in our minds. And we do recognize that moving forward, individual choice about medical decisions should be left in the hands of the individual and the doctors who provide us our care. For our government to have any sort of oversight in those personal decisions is clearly against what the Constitution provides for us, the protections that are afforded us, and I urge the committee to certainly consider those considerations when making a decision about something like this. Clearly, we do not want to have ourselves having to provide sort of personal information at every turn. So, you know, when we see the statistics of the hospitalizations, we can clearly see that this has been brought under control. And for us to be subjected to a emergency use product is very unfortunate in that this has never gone through its proper channels in terms of a full approval. So I think it's very unwise for us to make those types of decisions as a state government to implement those types of policies in a situation that clearly doesn't warrant the state of emergency declaration that we're still finding ourselves living under. So I think we really need to put everything into perspective about how important this is at this point, and the fact that we are no longer in what I would consider a state of emergency. And I think anybody who took a broader look at this would have to agree that we've managed to take this from a public health perspective and manage it properly. So from moving forward, I see no reason, even from the purpose of a government involvement in our lives, where we would need to have that type of oversight. So I strongly support House Bill 6302.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Do members of the committee have any questions for Mr. Allen? No questions. Thank you again for calling in. The next witness we have signed up is Christine Healy-Waldeck. Good evening, Christine. You have the floor to testify in House Bill 6302. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes or less. Thank you and welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Chairman Shanley and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you so much for your dedication to the people of Rhode Island. My name is Christine Healy-Waldeck. I'm a Rhode Island parent and co-founder of the Rhode Island Wellness Society. I stand in strong support of H 6302, which, if passed, would prohibit the use of vaccine passports in the state of Rhode Island. Thank you, Representative Place and co-sponsors, for this extremely important legislation. The idea of requiring free people to undergo a risky, liability-free medical procedure with a new experimental $100 billion sold-for-profit pharmaceutical product in order to maintain access to education, work, freedom of movement, goods and services, and society at large is frightening, grossly unjust, grotesquely unfair, and obscenely inequitable. Currently in the United States, there are 11 states that have passed legislation or issued executive orders to present mandatory COVID vaccinations or require proof of COVID vaccination via vaccine passport schemes. As of today, May 17th, 2021, as documented on state government websites, there are 45 states with active legislation that would prohibit mandatory COVID vaccinations, expand exemptions, and or prohibit vaccine passport programs. Frustrated, angry, and concerned Americans are reaching out to their lawmakers, demanding protective legislation against these liability-free, mandated COVID vaccination medical procedures. Of course, we all want the epidemic to end. However, implementing the widespread use of coercive COVID vaccination and vaccine passports is not an ethical, safe, inclusive, nor proper program for a number of reasons. First and foremost, as a parent who has witnessed the pain, suffering, and life-changing effects of vaccine injury in my family, I am deeply concerned about how vaccine passports can potentially segregate and isolate people with disabilities, people with underlying medical conditions, and people who may be medically contraindicated from undergoing the medical procedures of COVID vaccination. How will widespread requirement of vaccine passports affect these populations? The use of vaccine passports can potentially punish, discriminate, and exclude our fellow human beings solely because of their medical condition. How is this equitable? In addition, many people will decline a COVID injection because they or a loved one suffered from a previous vaccination adverse event. They may not be eligible for a medical exemption. They too will be very negatively impacted by the use of vaccine passports. How is this fair? I'm angered and saddened by the fact that the needs of these historically marginalized populations are once again not being considered. Secondly, the use of vaccine passports will require tech-savvy skills and ownership of expensive smartphones and electric mobile devices. The Biden administration said in March that it would not build a national vaccination app and instead will look to the private sector to create mobile digital passports. At this time, according to the Pew Research Center, only 81% of Americans own a smartphone and only 35.13% of the world's population owns a smartphone. The majority of people who own a smartphone are white, college graduates ages 18 to 29. What happens to people who do not own mobile devices? People who do not have the resources nor developmental or physical ability to utilize mobile phone devices and apps will be very unfairly and negatively impacted by a vaccine passport program. Plus, the constant upkeep and usage of a paper vaccine passport can be difficult and burdensome for people with physical disabilities, developmental disabilities, and for our elders. Third, I would just like to address that there are still questions about whether or not COVID-vaccinated individuals could transmit the virus. It clearly states on the CDC website, and I quote, "We are still learning how well vaccines prevent you from spreading the virus that causes COVID-19 to others, even if you do not have symptoms," end quote. Number four, the World Health Organization does not support the use of vaccine passports. According to WHO spokeswoman Margaret Harris, I quote, "We as a World Health Organization are saying at this stage we would not like to see the vaccination passport as a requirement for entry or exit because we are not certain at this stage that the vaccine prevents transmission."
Christine, can you wrap up your testimony? You're well over the 2 minutes.
I will.
Thank you so much.
As the doctor stated earlier, the ACLU is against it. The Electronic Frontier Foundation is against it. And in closing, I respectfully request the committee to please keep this thought into consideration. If we are all to be required to use a vaccine passport for society to return to normal, we will not be returning to normal. I implore the committee to please prohibit the use of coercive, dangerous, exclusive, discriminatory, and corrupt schemes of vaccine passports. I do not want to live in or help develop a culture where my fellow human beings are permanently isolated, segregated, denied access to work, education, buildings, goods and services because of their medical condition and vaccination status. I do not want to leave behind a world for my children and future generations that would coerce human beings to undergo a risky, liability-free medical procedure and have an experimental, liability-free, $100 billion sold-for-profit pharmaceutical biologic injected into our bodies in order to fully participate in our free society. Please prohibit the use of vaccine passports in Rhode Island. Please support H6302. Thank you so much for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee? No questions from members of the committee. The next witness we have signed up is Mary Breimer. Good evening, Mary. We're here discussing House Bill 6302. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes or less. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. I'm a member of the North Kingstown Town Council, and I'm the chairwoman of the North Kingstown Republican Town Committee, and I support this bill. Let's be honest, there's been an overreaction by government when we measure the collateral and economic damages incurred by individuals and businesses. We have indiscriminately thrown money in the name of panic stimulus, whether the recipients needed the money or not. Our stimulus efforts have created what the military would refer to as a situation with respect to getting people off of unemployment and return to the jobs that are waiting for them to come back to. We have a serious housing crisis resulting from all of this government intervention. The public is right to have distrust in our government, particularly the CDC, who has released conflicting guidance consistently, and the entire Gina Raimondo administration. She wasted $1.2 billion that should have been invested in our hospitals and medical infrastructure on pointless contact tracing and asymptomatic testing. To this day, I have never been contacted by a restaurant or other business that reported a case of COVID. The vaccine has not even been available to the entire public for 6 months yet. People deserve the time to consult with their own physician and receive education and guidance that is best for their individual situation. My understanding of the vaccine is that at this point, those who choose not to get vaccinated are only putting themselves at risk. Since our hospitals are better at diagnosing and prepared to treat COVID, the need for mandatory vaccination is just government overreach and a violation of HIPAA. It is time for the government to step aside and allow our economy to recover. And I don't know if you're aware, but the sound quality streaming has been cutting in and out to the public listening for the past 10 minutes.
Well, thank you for your testimony, and thank you for alerting us to the potential streaming issue. Do members of the committee have any questions for Ms. Breimer? No questions. Thank you for calling in, and thank you for your testimony. Next witness we have signed up is Courtney Goglia. Good evening, Courtney. You have the floor to testify on House Bill 6302. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. This is Courtney Goglia from North Kingstown, Rhode Island. This bill is necessary. I am in support of it. It's necessary to protect minority in the state who do have religious convictions and beliefs that prevent them from getting certain medical interventions. It is also necessary to protect those who medically cannot or who choose not to get certain shots based on their own risk-benefit analysis. Medical interventions are personal, private medical decisions. It is not the business of employers or those running public accommodations. When we choose to live in communities of people, we take on certain risks. Part of life. There's risks of communicable diseases, risks of car accidents, risks of many, many kinds that we mitigate when we can, but we cannot infringe on other people's bodies with those mitigation strategies. This bill is really a bill to protect women's rights and what we choose for our bodies. Women are at much less risk of any serious adverse effects from the live COVID virus than men, and of much greater risk of the rare serious adverse events being found and studied right now. Women under 50 in particular are at virtually no risk from the disease, but are at some risk of blood clots with thrombocytopenia. Employers, schools, and stores do not and should not know the medical history of others. Immunity from the live virus, particularly the behavior of T and B cells, looks like it is at least as good as the vaccines and that it will be long-term. Imagine a woman who has already conferred immunity from the live virus, who has thrombocytopenia, and chooses not to be vaccinated. She's being asked to take on risk with no benefit to herself or others, just to participate in society. This doesn't make, I don't think this bill makes financial sense either for our state, because I would expect an increase in employer discrimination claims and all of the money that might go into that. Thank you so much. I hope you all support this bill.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from committee members? Hearing none, we now move to the next witness, who is Christopher Bunyan. Good afternoon, Christopher. We're here discussing House Bill 6302. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Thank you and welcome.
Okay, thank you for taking the time to listen to me. My name's Christopher Bunyan. I'd first like to start off that none of the current biologics put out by either Pfizer, Moderna, or Janssen are actual vaccines. None of them are approved. They're all under emergency use authorization and currently in phase 3 trials. I don't feel anybody should be pressured via either a private or a public entity to take such a experimental biologic or gene therapy. I feel that by setting up a passport system would create a two-tier society which would further divide us and cause segregation and much more strife in general. The government doesn't have the right to, either through a private entity or itself, to force vaccines on the public. I mean, it's clearly spelled out in the Nuremberg Code. And I'd like to continue by saying that it's just another overstep, I should say, government in taking charge of what I decide is right for my own body and the bodies of my children. So I vehemently am against any kind of coercion to do so. Going over this real quick. So the government using private industry as a proxy is not acceptable, and a passport is basically exactly that. And so as it stands, I fervently support Bill 6302, and that is what I would like to say.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions for Mr. Bunyan from members of the committee? No questions. Thank you again for calling in. The next witness we have signed up is Darlene Kohler. Good afternoon, Darlene. We're here discussing House Bill 6302, and you are signed up in support. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes or less. Thank you and welcome.
Hi, I'm Rima Tomka. I just want to say I support the bill. I do not believe there should be vaccination passports, and if I cannot control the blood coursing through my veins, I do not know what kind of freedom I actually have. That's all I want to say.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony.
You're welcome. Good night.
Have a good night. The next witness we have signed up is Joseph Kohler. Good evening. Welcome to the House Committee on State Government and Elections. You have the floor to testify.
Yes. Hi, my name is Lisa Pomeroy. I am a resident of East Greenwich. I'm asking you to support H6302. I have children who are being pressured to receive this vaccine by teachers, peers, and others in the community. It is implied to them that if they are not vaccinated, they are endangering others and will miss out. This is unconscionable. This bill will help to prevent such coercion. As a parent, I would like to preserve my right to choose whether or not to vaccinate my children or to receive one myself. As a parent with degrees in molecular biology and medicine, I have grave concerns about mandating a vaccine that has not yet had years of study and full FDA approval, particularly for a low-risk population. COVID-19 vaccines are still under emergency use authorization. Even the fact sheets distributed at the time of vaccination state that the COVID-19 vaccine has not undergone the same type of review as an FDA-approved or cleared product. When the EUA provision was granted, it specified that individuals must be informed of the option to accept or refuse administration of the product. Mandating this vaccine effectively eliminates the option of refusing this vaccine to participate in society. In reviewing the growing body of literature regarding COVID, I have concerns with mandating this vaccine in a population at very low risk of adverse outcome from natural infection. There have been no deaths in Rhode Island from COVID for those under 25. COVID cases in children continue to fall without vaccination. Israeli researchers have found an increased number of cases of myocarditis of up to 1 in 20,000 in young men, likely associated with receiving the vaccine, especially the second dose. There are increasing reports of adverse cardiac, neurologic, and thrombotic outcomes in younger populations in the VAERS database as well. Each one of us should be able to make our own risk-benefit analysis regarding vaccination for COVID-19. Those with increased risk due to age or medical factors can choose to receive the vaccine as the risk of COVID infection likely outweighs the risks of vaccination. For those at lower risk of poor outcome from COVID, the risk of vaccination might outweigh the risk of COVID infection. This bill will preserve our right to make our own choices regarding our health and the risks we are willing to take. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Last witness, or not the last witness, the next witness is Rima Tomka. Not available. Carol Daukus. Good evening. This is the House Committee on State Government and Elections. We're here discussing House Bill 6302, and you are signed up to testify. Please introduce yourself and limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing my testimony. My name is Kimberly Fisher-Bunyan. I am a resident in Exeter, and I absolutely support this bill. I believe a few moments ago you spoke with you heard the testimony of my husband, and there were a few things that I would like to add to everything that he said. One being that overall the politicians and the local government need to stand up to Big Pharma and the elite few who are apparently running the show, and start looking out for those of us that vote all of you into office and to represent your constituents, and certainly not corporate America. Again, I would like to state that my body and the body of my children should not be dictated by any government. We should all have a choice whether you believe in taking this shot or not. That should be a personal choice, and certainly not something that should be warranted by having to show some type of passport. It definitely puts, I think, local businesses at a very unfortunate disadvantage to have to make these choices where you have someone walking into a store like myself who absolutely does not believe in this, and I will actually stop going to local businesses that don't drop this draconian mask policy and all these other things that have been going on. And then we also have the avalanche of side effects that are mounting, that are documented by VAERS, and unfortunately most of mainstream media is desperately trying to cover this up, all these issues that are happening that unfortunately a lot of people are not aware of. They're even using language that implies that you are immune when in fact you are not. And it's fooling a lot of people. It definitely creates more discrimination and division in society, and I think at this point we need to start standing up for our rights. There's going to be a lot of people referring to the Nuremberg Code, and it doesn't seem like anyone is following that. And I think right now probably our forefathers are rolling over in our grave, because it seems like every day we're becoming more like China and less like America. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me, and please, please, please support this bill and stop this madness, and let us go back to being free Americans with our dignified civil liberties and our constitutional rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness from members of the committee? No questions. Thank you again. The next witness we have signed up is Carol Daukus. Good evening, Carol. We're here discussing House Bill 6302, and you are signed up in support. You have the floor to testify. Please limit your testimony to 2 minutes or less. Thank you and welcome.
I will, sir. Thank you. Thank you for hearing my testimony, and thank you very much to the sponsors of this vital bill. My name is Carol Daukus. I'm a parent from Westerly and a small business owner. I urge you to please support this bill to protect your constituents from this threat of a COVID vaccine passport that would put us in harm's way. Everything is at stake here, the lives and livelihoods and privacy of our neighbors. First off, coercing anyone to take an experimental drug, legally and factually, that's what this COVID shot is. It does not enjoy FDA status as an approved vaccine. Under penalty, no less, it's a direct violation of the Nuremberg Code. It's unthinkable to even consider. The code recognizes that the risk must be weighed against the expected benefit, and that unnecessary pain and suffering must be avoided. According to VAERS, which is highly underreported to, there have been more deaths from this experimental vaccine in the past 3 months than deaths caused by FDA-approved vaccines in the past decade. We literally are the guinea pigs, the test animals in the drug trial. That continues until 2023, by the way. And without this bill passing, Rhode Islanders would be forced into a sort of Russian roulette, choosing their bodily autonomy, risking adverse reaction, or worse, death, to their livelihood, their access to education, and to public accommodations, life as we know it. They'd be excluded from society. This is a no-win situation and has no place in Rhode Island. This would amount to tyranny, all over a drug that has not been proven to stop transmission of COVID. My job as a mother is to protect my children and their medical information. The idea of a COVID vaccine passport poses a direct threat to my family's health and life that I've worked really hard for. I could not imagine raising my children here under such suppression. the life in Rhode Island that we love would cease to exist for us. And for many parents with whom I've spoken, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that are actually looking at real estate elsewhere. They're preparing. This would no longer be a safe and desirable home and place to raise families, plan a future, earn our livings if there were a vaccine passport. So please pass this bill and protect the privacy and lives of your constituents and preserve the life of Rhode Island itself as we know it. This potential passport would irreparably divide and harm Rhode Islanders going forward. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee? No questions. Thank you again. Next witness we have signed up is Rachel McIntosh. Good evening, Rachel. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you. We're here discussing House Bill 6302, and you are signed up in support, and you have the floor to testify. So please move forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First off, I'd like to say thank you to Rep. Place, Quattrochi, and Newberry for introducing this bill. I think it's very important that there's no discrimination of people based on their status of any sort of vaccination, to tell you the truth, let alone this situation. I worked for a defense contractor, and I was in the marketing department of a defense contractor. I made sure to watch the FDA approval meeting. It wasn't an approval for a vaccine. It was an approval for emergency use authorization. Vaccine, quote-unquote vaccine, in the Moderna and the AstraZeneca human trials are not over until 2023. What we're dealing with right now is a massive marketing campaign. What I'd like to also say is that there are people out there that are trying to make this, I guess you call it a vaccine passport. They're pro this because they feel like they don't want to be around people that have been vaccinated. They are fearing that they are going to get some sort of shedding from the people who are vaccinated. I think it should be anybody's right to put anything in their body like this. I don't think we should make it so that we've got bouncers at nightclubs trying to find out about our medical records. We should have kids being able, who they've worked really hard, did well on the SATs. If they get admitted to Brown University, they should be able to get into Brown University and learn. Granted, that's a whole other situation because it's a private institution. But as far as public life, I do not agree with a vaccine passport. So I am pro 6302.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Rachel. Are there any questions from members of the committee? No questions. Next witness we have signed up is Dempsey Campbell. Good evening, Dempsey. We're here discussing House Bill 6302. You are signed up in support and have the floor to testify. Thank you and welcome.
Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify. I'm a senior in high school, and I am in support of not using the vaccine passports in Rhode Island. I think that there's going to be a clear divide of those who are vaccinated and those who aren't vaccinated in the high school, and I just don't think there's any reason for that to happen. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Dempsey. Do members of the committee have any questions for Dempsey? No questions. Have a great night. Are there any more witnesses signed up? All right. There are no witnesses signed up. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We appreciate your testimony.